Okay, you have no idea how much you made my night. I'm so excited to answer this. Okay, let me read the questions that I have here. I'm gonna try and walk through them. Bear in mind that I have ADHD and I love to ramble. I love to talk. I might get lost several times, but I'm gonna try and stay on task. Can you walk me through campaign setting and bad guy creation process? I'm gonna start with bad guy creation process. Um, we'll start with Tivoli. Okay, so Tivoli, I knew that I wanted him to be a fourth dimensional character that kind of, you know, made fun of and knew everything that was going on. It was like, yeah, I know this is Harvey, and not because Harvey knows me or I know Harvey, but because I know the campaign and I know that Jake's playing this character right now. And I never really like broke into that. It kind of became like a as we progressed, it felt right that Harvey had spent longer in Toffoli's dungeon than he had meant to. They all had, because time works a little differently in this zone. And Harvey and Tivoli really did become friends. And it really changed how Tivoli was. Like, Tivoli was just this, like, sadistic monster who would try and kill every single person that came here. And once he started hanging out with Harvey, it was just like, I'm hanging out with my bro and like coming up with these fun challenges that not so lethal anymore, but like, you know, it's fun to watch them. Like the Goblin one where the Goblin had to find a green spoon or whatever it was, you know, and Tivoli and Harvey are watching this one and they're like, he has the spoon. Why isn't he completing the challenge? And you guys started experimenting with adding different colored items, and he would still pick them up. And then they went down there and were like, "Hey, man, you won. Why are you what's going on?" And the goblin was colorblind. So in the beginning, my goal was Tivoli would be the villain of this area. Even though I was still kind of working out what exactly this area was, because this wasn't planned, this wasn't in the campaign, this was just kind of like I'm describing something and the world is literally being built as we're making rolls and playing it out. um, and I was able to tie it in, because you had done so much work with Harvey. You had built out so much of Leafside that I was just able to loop it in. Like, you built that section of the world. I might have conceptualized it and created the points, but you're the one that put in all the work to develop that area and find out the lore that I had built. Um, Let me look here. Do I have any other examples of villains? Because the thing about like you guys playing is there are no villains per se. I guess the biggest would be Ricardo in the case of Marcus, but it's been a while since I've actually conceptualized a pure villain that I've used. Um, you can do your generic tropes as well. Like my first campaign in the Kingdom of Bycia, the villain was the Lich King, and the campaign was going to be about like becoming a member of this group that is set up by the king's advisor, and you go around completing quests and trying to save the day. Eventually the king's advisor is like, hey man, the Lich King is out, we all go fuck him up. And I had conceptualized a campaign based on that, like stopping the Lich King. Once I started going free form, it's kind of like the involvement of what your character's doing. Like, if you're not motivated as your character, if Anders is not motivated to go fight off the false Hydra, I'm not going to make Anders go and fight off the false Hydra. Whatever character is interested in being in that section of the world and like discovering this mystery, I'm not saying that Anders wouldn't, But if I had to pick between Anders and Harvey, I know Harvey's the one I'm giving it to. If I had to pick between Hattie and Harvey, I know Harvey is the one I'm going to give it to. I'm not going to, impose a Drancaster quest on Harvey if it's not going to make sense. Like, if Harvey ends up going to Drancaster and he tries to join the Adventurers Guild, then I'm going to make quests that involve that. If Hattie goes into the Wildwoods and he's trying to find Gonzo to answer questions, but Gonzo's missing, then I'm going to make a quest about that. I build my world first. I know what the world is going to be. I don't know, like, off the rip. It's kind of the same thing with me building my characters, my actual playable characters. I start with my concept, and then as I'm building it, I think more about, like, what do I want to be later? I pick a goal level, and I will build based off of that. So if I know I want to be a hybrid class, I'm thinking, when do I want to hybrid, and what do I want to hybrid into? Because realistically, every class starts at level 3 when you pick your archetype. So I'm thinking, I want to be this archetype, and I want a multi-class so that I pick up these perks, and I want to play that into my character's personality and traits. So if I want to start off as a pirate ninja or a pirate samurai, then I have to be level 6 starting off, bare minimum, or I have to be in the process of working into that archetype. If that's what I want to start off as, though, if that's my backstory and all that, then I'm going to talk to the DM and be like, hey, I want to be this. Can we start at this level so that I can multi-class into this and have this and that? Like that. I take that into consideration. When it comes to maps and world building, for me, the world builds itself as I'm building the map. It's kind of like a blank canvas, or like when people carve marble, they say, like, it's inside this block. I'm just bringing it out. And that's how it feels. Like, I know every river. I know every tree. I know every mountain. I know where the regions are divided. And I'll know it as I'm building it. So if I don't like it, I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh, that's not right. I'll wipe it, start again. If I put a tree down and I zoom out and I look at it and I'm like, no, that tree needs to be over here. I'm going to add a couple trees here. Needs to be a mountain here. Needs to be a town there. Let's add a lake here. Like, I know as I'm building it what is what and where everything goes. I know whether or not it's going to be a city based on the locale. And then once I know that it's a city, I determine what's going on in this city. What are the people like? What is the vibe of this city? I'll come up with a general theme for the town. So, like, let's say I started with Drancaster. Drancaster is the city of merchants. So I know that city is going to be kind of grimy in the lower sections. It's going to be very beautiful and like eloquent at the top where all the moneymakers are. I know that there's going to be this shift. I know that the higher up into the city that you go, the more guards there are going to be. I know that there's a secret market, an undermarket. I know that, like, there's a lot going on. Then I'll look at Leafside, and I'll be like, okay, so this is a small village out in the Wildwoods. Who's out here? What kind of stuff do they go through on a daily basis? What are their biggest dangers? Are they very humble? How many visitors do they get? And I'll think about like that. Then we go to Oakheart, and I'm like, okay, Oakheart, this town is really picking up because there's a sawmill here, and they have these golems that go out into the Wildwoods and harvest the trees and bring them back here, deliver them to the lumber mill where people are making, their money, turning the logs into planks and sending the planks out to be used for the war efforts or to build on new additions and really expand the human territory. Like, all of that goes into consideration. Let me see here. Setting, campaign, and bad guy creation. Okay. So bad guy creation we already touched on. Campaign. Campaign is a rough one. So the way that I build my campaigns, I will have a general idea of what it is that I want to do. For example, there is a campaign that I was going to build for Theodore's birthday. We've never gotten to play this campaign. I really do want to finish building it out, but it is an unfinished product. That's why I've never pushed it out. I could have pushed it out, but if it's not done, it's not done. I'm not going to launch out a half-baked idea. But the general concept was everybody wakes up in a different body in the middle of a cult ritual, and the cultists swap into your body and you swap into the cultist body, and there's misunderstandings. There's like a lot of shit going on, and then from that point on, your character is inside the body of this cultist, and the campaign becomes, how do I get my body back? What even happened to me? Is this my new life? Is there a way to reverse this? How can I fix this? And that's not always the case. With Harvey kind of leaned into his life. We started with him and Gonzo receiving a letter from the Grung and going out, getting ambushed by the Grung. That was built based off of, this is Harvey, like, this is the situation that he's in. He doesn't really, and some of those were my decisions, some of those were your decisions, but I made those decisions based on what you had given me to work with for Harvey. In a general sense, I will have a plan. So, like, going to the Elder Leaf with Gonzo and meeting up with the Grung, that was the plan. Getting ambushed by the Grung, that was the plan. Anything that happened afterwards was kind of, I was basing off of how Harvey was reacting to the situations that he had been, and kind of throwing in other stuff that I had planned. When the Grung referred to you as a Tenby, I knew it was because the Grung knew that there was the village of Tenby. They were not affected by the false Hydra's magic. I knew that the village of Tenby was wiped out by the false Hydra, and this was all to, if you really go back and you look at it and you read it and you have the context, you piece together, okay, so Tenby, Gonzo, okay, this was the plan from the very beginning. And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's just, I build off of things. So I start with the Grung, then I moved with the Tenby, and then I added in the false Hydra, and I tied all of these things together so it looks like this was the plan all along. And in actuality, I had a couple of loose ideas and I stringed them together from column A to column B based on your involvement in the campaign and how Harvey was feeling and going through these things, the roles that you were making, like, all of that stuff really affected how the campaign turned out. Let me look at the next question here. I hope that I'm staying on point here, because I really am trying. Do you come up with events first, or the characters that influence those events? Sometimes I have an idea and I will build off of that idea, as I mentioned. Sometimes I have, that's actually exactly what we were just talking about. I'll have multiple different ideas and I'll be thinking, like, how can I incorporate this into the campaign? And as you're progressing through the campaign and as your motivations are becoming more clear, I can loop in these ideas to, tie into the rest of the world, to the point where everything that you had built for the Wildwoods, when I went into the past to play with Marcus and Jarek had all of the information that you had developed with Harvey to work off of. So it was so easy for me to build this campaign in a time of peace where the false Hydra hasn't destroyed everybody and that Orange Host is really thriving. it became more of a, this is what I want to do, and I really want to work on the role playing aspect, and less of the action, less of the mystery, and it becomes like something that me and Marcus do a lot, where we will develop NPCs and go on quests with the NPCs, as famously said by Mike Flippo, to earn their trust, and that's honestly what it does. Yeah, you go out with these NPCs and you're developing the NPC while the character is figuring themselves out, and then you both develop together. You make your own storylines based off of the events that go on between you and these NPCs. Same thing with Harvey and Gonzo. Like, I was still figuring out Gonzo, but I knew that he was more of like a father figure. I knew that as far as everyone was concerned, that was your dad. And playing on that energy, which you did so great. Oh my god. I love playing with you goddamn motherfuckers. You're all professionals. But you can build off of and kind of create based on how the character plays, and what their real motivations are. Like, it's all about the knives. I know you know about knives. Let's see here. Storylines. Where do you start with those? Kind of broken record at this point. But when I was building the campaign, I took ideas from everybody. I knew one thing and one thing only. This was going to be my masterpiece campaign. This was going to be West Marches themed. I wanted you to be able to go anywhere in the world and have something to do. And sometimes that's easiest by having things pre-planned. I don't typically pre-plan things, but if you pre-plan just a little bit and the characters can, you know, use their own motivations to be curious about the world, anytime anyone goes anywhere, then you can kind of find a way to loop it in. So, like, let's say you go to Arcala. Let's say Harvey leaves the Wildwoods, and the first place that he goes to is Arcala. And let's say that he is looking for information on how to find a way to restore Okan. So he goes to Arcala, and he finds that there's a library there, and there was a book that would have had the answer, but it was pulled from the library and put into the restricted section in the capital of the kingdom. So now you have to go to the capital of the kingdom and seek audience to get permission to see this book. And then you're going to be introduced to NPCs that are going to be all about protecting the secrets of what actually happened. And then you find out, like, oh, okay, so they're hiding something. And you're going to sneak into the library. You're going to steal the book. You know, it's all this kind of stuff. You just kind of riff off of it. You take your general idea, and you have an idea of how it's going to play out. You know, if your end goal is Harvey needs to confront the capital, Harvey needs to confront the people who have this secret, Harvey needs to find out what the secret is, then you're going to build the campaign, the storyline, to loop you through to that. You know, I always think about, if this is my goal here, what can I do to get them over there? I don't want a railroad. But how can I get them interested in doing that? And that is probably what you're here looking for. You know, I can tell. Let me see. I think there's one more question. How do you decide what NPCs are doing at any given time? Golden rule for me: if I am not actively using that NPC, they are dead to me. They do not exist. Once it is time for them to exist, then I think about, what were they doing in this time? Am I going to use it to create a plot hook? So let's say Harvey goes out to Arcala and he's looking for this book, and then he comes back and Gonzo is missing. And he's now, what happened to Gonzo? And he's going to look for tracks. He's going to interview everybody. He's gonna find out what the hell happened and where he went. Maybe he'll be like, yeah, okay, Gonzo's just on business. But knowing Harvey, he'd be like, and that's, I decide what they're doing based on whether or not I am going to use them for anything. If I'm not going to use them for anything, they're just living their life. Um, Sometimes I'll play it out like Marcus loves the low key roleplay sessions where, like, he's, I don't know if you've ever heard about Mama Maple, but Mama Maple is this colomancer. She uses magic to create food, and she uses that magic food, or she uses the magic of colomancy to create recipes that shouldn't exist. Like, let's say a pizza roll, and every time you bite into it, the pizza roll reforms. Infinite pizza roll. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think about, and that's the kind of stuff that I put into the world. Some people, they don't want that. They don't want the low key role playing sessions. They want, like, I want the action. I want the role play too, but I want the action. I want to beat the fuck out of everything. I want to be a badass, and I want to, like, really develop my character. So, like, Bernard is the perfect character. The perfect character I've ever played. I've never loved a character like I love Bernard, because he has all this action, he has all this role play, he has his talents, and he utilizes them. He's how do I put it? He's a ranger. Like, he utilizes his beast. He is a walking arsenal, probably the strongest character I've ever made, and that includes, like, Kavaki. Yes, he had high strength, and he could pass an athletics check, but that was it. If he gets restrained, if he gets stunned, like, he doesn't have answers for that. Not to say that martial classes or whatever, like, everybody knows martial classes are kind of fucked up, especially fighters. But Bernard, especially after the sorcerer thing, oh my lord. No. I hope that helps. I know I get a little distracted. It's the ADHD in me, but if this helped, let me know. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. But there was no way I was going to be able to type this out. It was going to be like a fucking book. I really am so passionate about D&D and world building, and just the campaigns that we play. I could talk about it literally forever. Literally forever.